20 games that are still good more than 10 years later. Skyrim. Well, here we go again, the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. It's been over a decade, and somehow this game refuses to age. Bethesda dropped this masterpiece back in 2011, and here we are, still talking about it like it came out yesterday. If anything, it's like the Chuck Norris of video games, eternal and unstoppable. What makes Skyrim so good even now? It's all about the freedom. You can be whoever you want, go wherever you want, and do whatever you want. Want to slay dragons? Cool. Steal cheese wheels from every tavern in the land? Go for it. The game doesn't just give you a sandbox, it throws you into a whole freaking snow-covered world and says, have fun. The world of Skyrim is massive, but it's the little details that make it timeless. From the moment you step out of that Helgen cave and see the towering mountains, it's pure magic, and the music, don't even get me started. The Dragonborn theme alone is enough to give you chills. Sure, the combat's a little clunky by today's standards, and yes, Bethesda's signature jank is alive and well, but honestly, it's all part of the charm. Plus, the modding community has kept this game alive and thriving. Want to turn dragons into Thomas the Tank Engine? Done. Want a fresh coat of HD paint on the whole game? Mods have got you. So yeah, whether you're diving back in for the 10th time or somehow playing it for the first, Skyrim is still as good as it was over a decade ago. It's not just a game, it's a legend, and let's be real, it's probably gonna get released again in the next few years and will still be hyped. Fuss Roda, baby. Red Dead Redemption.
Who said I was a decent fella? It's been abandoned.
Red Dead Redemption. This one's a true classic and easily one of the most influential games of all time. Rockstar released it in 2010, and even today it's still a game that hits hard whether you're exploring the Wild West or just soaking in the story. First off, the setting. The game absolutely nails that late Wild West vibe where civilization is creeping in, but the outlaw way of life isn't quite gone. Riding through vast deserts, encountering random strangers, and watching the sunset over the plains, it all feels so alive. Rockstar nailed the atmosphere so perfectly that even today, it's hard to find a game that captures the West this well. But the heart of Red Dead Redemption? John Marston. This dude is one of the most iconic protagonists in gaming. His story of redemption, family, and revenge is unforgettable. The writing is stellar, the characters feel real, and let's be honest, the ending. It still hits like a freight train, even if you know it's coming.
Now get going.
You stay out of trouble, John.
Gameplay-wise, it's held up surprisingly well. Sure, it doesn't have all the fancy mechanics of RDR2, but the shooting, horse riding, and side missions are still solid. And let's not forget Undead Nightmare, the zombie-themed expansion that turns the Wild West into a horror movie. That DLC alone is worth a revisit. So why play Red Dead Redemption over a decade later? Because it's still one of the best stories in gaming, set in a world that feels timeless. Whether you're diving in for nostalgia or experiencing it for the first time, it's a must-play. And hey, if Rockstar ever decides to remaster it, we'll all be here, ready to saddle up again. The Witcher 2. The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings. It's been over a decade since CD Projekt Red dropped this gem in 2011, and it's still an absolute standout in the RPG world. Sure, The Witcher 3 gets all the glory these days, but The Witcher 2, it's where the series really hit its stride. Let's talk story. This game throws you into a world of political intrigue, tough moral choices, and a plot that twists and turns constantly. You're Geralt of Rivia, a monster hunter caught in a web of assassination, betrayal, and war. And the best part, your choices actually matter. The game has two entirely different story paths depending on a decision you make early on. That's some next level replayability. Visually, The Witcher 2 still holds up, especially on PC. The environments are dense and detailed, from dark forests to bustling cities, and the atmosphere is rich with that gritty, medieval vibe. The game is also packed with memorable characters like Iorveth and Vernon Roche, who keep the story engaging and unpredictable.
Goal is Foltest killer. I'll remember, Roach.
The combat it's a big step up from the first game. I mean, we all really hate that clunky-ass combat of Witcher 1, but anyways, with more action-focused mechanics, though, it's definitely challenging. You've got to think about your positioning, use potions strategically, and prepare before fights. It's not as smooth as The Witcher 3, but it's satisfying when you get the hang of it. So, why revisit The Witcher 2 today? It's an incredible RPG that still feels fresh, with a story that rivals some of the best in gaming. Whether you're new to the series or a fan looking to see where it all began before Wild Hunt, this one's absolutely worth your time. Plus, it's a great reminder of how CD Projekt Red built the foundation for one of the greatest RPG trilogies ever. Bioshock Infinite. Bioshock Infinite. Man, even after more than a decade, this game is still something special. Released in 2013, it took the Bioshock formula and launched it into the clouds, literally. Instead of the dark, underwater dystopia of Rapture, this time you're exploring Colombia, a floating city that's as gorgeous as it is unsettling. You play as Booker DeWitt, a man tasked with rescuing Elizabeth, a mysterious girl locked away in a tower. But of course it's Bioshock, so things are way more complicated than they seem. The story dives deep into themes of racism, nationalism, and the idea of alternate realities, and by the end, your brain is pretty much melted in the best way possible. That ending. It's one of the most talked about twists in gaming, and it still holds up. Gameplay-wise, Bioshock Infinite is fast, fun, and chaotic. The addition of the Skylines rails you can zip around on during battles makes combat feel dynamic and fresh. The Vigors, which are basically magic powers, let you experiment with different playstyles, whether you're flinging fireballs or sending enemies flying with shockwaves. And then there's Elizabeth. She's not just your sidekick, she's a huge part of why this game works. She helps you in combat, tosses you supplies, and feels like a real character instead of just someone tagging along. Her chemistry with Booker keeps the story grounded even as it gets more and more mind-bending. Sure, some people critique the game for being more action-heavy than the original Bioshock, and the exploration isn't as deep as it was in Rapture, but the art direction, the story, and the sheer ambition of Bioshock Infinite make it a game worth revisiting. Even now, it's a stunning mix of action, storytelling, and world building. If you've never played it or it's been a while, now's a great time to dive back into Colombia. Just be ready for some existential questions when the credits roll. Fallout New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas. Now this is a game that's aged like fine wine. Released back in 2010 by Obsidian Entertainment, it's still considered one of the best RPGs ever made. Even now, over a decade later, people are still modding it, replaying it, and singing its praises, and for good reason. The setting is chef's kiss. The Mojave wasteland is packed with personality, from the neon glitz of New Vegas to the desolate beauty of the desert. It's not just a backdrop, it feels alive, full of factions vying for control, quirky side characters, and stories hidden in every corner. You've got the New California Republic, Caesar's Legion, Mr. House, and even the option to go full wildcard and carve your own path. The choices are yours, and they actually matter. What sets New Vegas apart is how deep the role-playing goes. Your decisions don't just tweak the story, they can completely change the game's direction. Want to be a charming diplomat who talks their way out of everything? Do it. Prefer to be a stealthy assassin or a chaotic wildcard blowing stuff up? That's cool too. The game adapts to you in a way that few RPGs manage. The dialogue and writing are top-notch, packed with humor, drama, and moral gray areas. You'll constantly find yourself questioning which faction you should support, or if you should even trust any of them. And let's not forget the companions like Boone or Veronica, who bring their own stories and personalities to the journey. Sure, New Vegas had its share of bugs at launch classic Bethesda Obsidian, but with modern patches and mods, it's never been smoother to play. The combat might feel a bit dated compared to newer Fallout games, but the depth of the gameplay and story more than makes up for it. If you somehow haven't played Fallout New Vegas yet, do yourself a favor and dive in. Whether it's your first run or your 10th, the Mojave Wasteland always has something new to discover. It's a game that proves great storytelling and freedom of choice never go out of style. Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 now. Here's a game that still stands as one of the greatest RPGs of all time, even over a decade later. Released in 2010 by BioWare, this one didn't just raise the bar for the series, it basically set the gold standard for storytelling, character development, and sci-fi gaming. What makes Mass Effect 2 so legendary? It's all about the squad. The game puts you in command of the Normandy as Commander Shepard, building a team of misfit heroes to take on the mysterious collectors. Every crew member has their own backstory, loyalty missions, and unique personalities, and getting to know them is half the fun. From the badass assassin Thane to the quirky scientist Mordin, seriously, his singing moment is iconic. These characters stick with you long after the credits roll. The story itself is a masterclass in pacing. The opening scene alone, where the Normandy gets destroyed and Shepard dies, sets the tone for a darker, more personal tale. It's all about preparing for the final mission, the suicide mission, and it's one of the most intense, memorable finales in gaming. Every choice you make, every upgrade you fund, every loyalty mission you complete, it all matters when the chips are down.
Thank you, Legion. I understand your...
Gameplay-wise, it's a big leap from the first Mass Effect. The combat is tighter, the UI is cleaner, and the whole game feels smoother. It ditches some of the more clunky RPG mechanics for a streamlined action RPG experience, and honestly, it works. The shooting feels great, biotic powers are super fun to use, and managing your squad in combat is a blast. Sure, people might nitpick the resource scanning minigame. We've all spent way too much time scanning for element 0, but let's be real, that's a tiny complaint in the grand scheme of things. So you may ask, why does Mass Effect 2 still hold up today? Because it's a masterpiece of sci-fi storytelling, the relationships you build, the choices you make, and the incredible world building are unmatched. Whether you're revisiting it for nostalgia or diving in for the first time, Mass Effect 2 is a must-play that hasn't lost an ounce of its magic. It's a game that defined a generation, and it's still just as good as it was back in 2010. Batman Arkham City. Batman Arkham City, just what a game. Even over a decade later, it's still the gold standard for superhero games, and honestly, it might just be one of the best games, period. Rocksteady took everything great about Arkham Asylum and cranked it up to 11, giving us an open world Gotham playground packed with villains, secrets, and that unmistakable Batman vibe. Let's start with the city itself. Arkham City is a sectioned off part of Gotham turned into a giant prison, and it's grimy, dark, and so full of personality. You're gliding between rooftops, diving into alleyways, and stumbling into all kinds of trouble. It's exactly how you'd imagine Gotham at its worst, but in the best way possible. And the combat is still legendary. The free flow fighting system makes every punch, counter, and gadget combo feel fluid and satisfying. It's easy to pick up, but there's a depth to it that keeps you hooked, especially when you're facing huge groups or mixing in stealth to take out enemies one by one.
I need a word with this. On me! I got him!
The story is where Arkham City really shines. It's got everything high stakes, deep character moments, and some jaw-dropping twists. Mark Hamill as the Joker and Kevin Conroy as Batman absolutely own their roles, and the dynamic between them is intense. That ending? It's bold, emotional, and something that sticks with you long after the credits roll. What's crazy is how much there is to do. Beyond the main story, you've got the Riddler puzzles, side missions with villains like Mr. Freeze and Zsasz, and even the chance to play as Catwoman, who adds her own flair to the gameplay. Every corner of the city feels like it's got a story to tell. Arkham City's still so good today, because it nails the fantasy of being Batman. You're not just playing a game, you are the Dark Knight, gliding across rooftops, solving crimes, and taking down Gotham's worst. Whether it's your first playthrough or your 10th, it's a game that never loses its magic. If you haven't been back to Arkham in a while, do yourself a favor and suit up again. It's still a masterpiece. Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 isn't just a game, it's a moment in gaming history that refuses to fade no matter how much time passes. Dropping in 2004, it somehow feels like it's been here forever, while still blowing your mind every time you revisit it. This isn't just nostalgia talking. Half-Life 2 genuinely holds up. Let's talk about City 17. The moment you step off that train, you know you're in for something special. It's oppressive, eerie, and feels weirdly alive in a way most games even now can't match. The Combine's alien technology fuses with crumbling human structures, creating a world that's as unsettling as it is fascinating. And Ravenholm, that's the kind of place you never forget, no matter how much you wish you could. Gameplay-wise, Half-Life 2 is still a masterclass. The gravity gun is iconic, not just a weapon, but a tool for chaos and creativity. It's a sandbox in your hands, letting you solve puzzles and fight enemies in ways that feel unique to you. And the physics, they weren't just groundbreaking back then, they're still impressive now. Everything feels tactile, like the world reacts to you in real, meaningful ways. What really sets it apart though is the pacing. It doesn't just throw everything at you at once. It builds, shifts, and changes constantly. One minute you're in a full-on firefight, the next you're quietly exploring a decayed structure waiting for something to go horribly wrong. The transitions are seamless, and it keeps you hooked the entire time. And let's not forget the storytelling. Valve doesn't hold your hand or shove exposition in your face. Instead, the narrative unfolds naturally through the environment and the people you meet. Alex Vance is one of the best companions in gaming, hands down funny, smart, and someone you genuinely care about. So why revisit Half-Life 2 today? Because it still feels ahead of its time. The gameplay, the world building, the little details, it's all so meticulously crafted that even modern games could learn a thing or two. If you've never played it, you're missing out on something truly special. And if you have, well, you already know it's worth going back. This game isn't just a classic, it's a masterpiece that hasn't aged a day. Left 4 Dead 2. You know what's wild? Left 4 Dead 2 is still one of the most chaotic, adrenaline-pumping games you can play even over a decade later. This 2009 gem didn't just define the co-op zombie shooter genre, it is the genre. It's not about the story, it's about the pure chaos of surviving wave after wave of undead with 3 of your closest or loudest friends. This game doesn't give you a moment to breathe. The AI director keeps throwing curveballs. One run might be manageable, but the next, you're knee-deep in a horde, trying to fend off a tank while a jockey drags your buddy into the swamp. It's unpredictable, and that's what makes every single session so damn fun. The real charm of Left 4 Dead 2 is how much it relies on your team to succeed or fail spectacularly. You can't play this solo and expect the same magic. It's the moments where someone panics, accidentally startles a witch, and suddenly the entire team is screaming and sprinting for their lives that make it unforgettable. What's crazy is how well it's aged. The campaigns, still iconic, whether it's the abandoned amusement park in Dark Carnival or the eerie fog of the swamp. Each one feels unique. The special infected, they're the ultimate curveballs, boomers, chargers, and spitters keep the chaos fresh. And don't even get me started on community mods. They've turned this game into an endless sandbox of ridiculous and creative content. Here's the deal, if you've never played it, you're missing out on some of the best multiplayer fun ever, and if you have played it, you already know it's time to grab some friends, fire it up, and see how long you can survive. Just remember, in Left 4 Dead 2, you're only as strong as your weakest teammate, and that's usually the one who grabs a frying pan. GTA 4. Let's talk about Grand Theft Auto 4. This one hit the streets in 2008, and even after all these years, it's a game that sticks with you. While GTA 5 may have stolen the spotlight, there's something about GTA 4 that feels special, gritty, grounded, and more focused on story and characters than just over-the-top chaos. The star of the show is Niko Bellic, a Serbian immigrant trying to leave his violent past behind. He comes to Liberty City chasing the American dream, but instead he finds himself pulled into a spiral of crime, betrayal, and moral dilemmas. Niko's story hits harder than most, exploring themes like loyalty, revenge, and what it means to start over. He's not your typical GTA protagonist, he's more human, more vulnerable, and that's what makes him unforgettable. And then there's Liberty City. It's not just a playground, it's alive. The bustling streets, the radio stations, the little details in every corner, it feels like a real place. This isn't the sunny, carefree vibe of Los Santos. Liberty City is dark, rainy, and full of tension, which makes it feel like you're truly part of Niko's struggle.
Makes it okay to stab your friends in the back?
Gameplay-wise, GTA 4 dialed back some of the silliness from earlier games in favor of a more realistic approach. The driving feels heavier, the combat more deliberate. Some fans missed the craziness, but others loved how grounded it felt. And let's not forget the side activities. Bowling with Roman, yes, he will call you constantly, comedy clubs, and just cruising the city at night listening to those killer radio soundtracks. What makes GTA 4 still worth playing today? It's the story, the atmosphere, and how raw and real it feels. It's a different kind of GTA 1 that trades mindless fun for something deeper and more meaningful. If you've only played GTA 5, give 4 a shot. It's a slower burn, but man, it's worth every second. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag is the game that said, forget tradition, let's make the player a pirate, and honestly, that bold move paid off big time. It's been over a decade since its 2013 release, and this one still feels fresh, adventurous, and downright fun. It's not just an Assassin's Creed game, it's the ultimate pirate fantasy. From the second you take the wheel of the Jackdaw, you know this isn't your typical EC experience. The open waters of the Caribbean stretch out before you, dotted with treasure-laden islands, naval enemies, and untold adventures. And the ship combat? Let's be real, it's the reason you'll keep coming back. You're not just piloting a ship, you're commanding a floating fortress, tearing through enemy vessels with cannons blazing, and boarding them to the sound of your crew's sea shanties. Those shanties, they're not just songs, they're a vibe. They'll get stuck in your head for weeks, and you won't even be mad about it. But let's not forget Edward Kenway. He's not your noble assassin archetype, he's a selfish, reckless, treasure-hungry rogue, and yet he's incredibly compelling. Watching him grow from a carefree pirate chasing gold to a man grappling with his choices and finding meaning in the Assassin's Creed is one of the most satisfying character arcs in the series.
Leave this life for a lasting peace.
What really sets Black Flag apart is how alive the world feels. The Caribbean is teeming with life, from bustling ports to underwater shipwrecks hiding secrets. You'll explore dense jungles, stealth through ancient ruins, and even hunt sharks. It's a world where every corner feels worth exploring, and the game never stops rewarding your curiosity. Now, is it a perfect Assassin's Creed game? Not quite. The traditional Assassin gameplay takes a backseat to the pirate action, and some fans of the series missed the intricate conspiracies and city-based parkour. But honestly, that's what makes Black Flag so special. It's not trying to be just another AC title, it's doing its own thing, and it nails it. Black Flag still stands out today because it's pure, unfiltered escapism. It's a game that lets you live out your pirate dreams in a way no other game has quite managed. Whether you're looting treasure, singing shanties, or just sailing into the sunset, it's a reminder of how much fun gaming can be when it doesn't take itself too seriously. If you haven't played it or haven't revisited it in years, it's time to hoist the sails again. Dishonored. Dishonored is one of those rare games that makes you feel like you're the smartest, sneakiest person alive or a chaotic force of nature, depending on how you play. Released in 2012 by Arcane Studios, it's a stealth action game that puts freedom of choice at the forefront. And even more than a decade later, it's still an absolute masterpiece. You play as Corvo Atano, a royal bodyguard framed for the murder of the Empress and tasked with taking revenge against those who betrayed you. Oh, and you're also gifted supernatural powers by a mysterious figure known as the Outsider. And the story's great, but the real magic? It's in how you approach every situation. Dunwall, the plague-ridden industrial city you're set loose in, is a character in itself. It's bleak, grimy, and packed with secrets. Every level is a sprawling playground, offering multiple paths and endless possibilities. Want to blink teleport across rooftops, sneak through vents, and leave without a trace? You can, or you can possess a rat, sneak through a sewer grate, and emerge on the other side of a guarded fortress. The creativity is endless, and every playthrough feels completely different. But here's the kicker: your choices have consequences. Go full chaos, slashing your way through guards and civilians alike, and Dunwall descends further into plague-ridden despair. Take the stealthy, non-lethal route and the world and the ending changes accordingly. It's a game that rewards thinking ahead and tailoring your playstyle to the story you want to tell, and the powers. They're what make Dishonored so special. From stopping time to summoning swarms of rats, they give you tools to approach every encounter in ways that feel uniquely yours. Combine that with an arsenal of crossbows, swords, and traps, and you're basically an unstoppable force if you want to be. Even now, Dishonored feels like a game ahead of its time. The level design, the freedom of choice, and the atmospheric world are unmatched. It's a reminder of what makes immersive sims so special. They trust you to figure things out your way. Whether you've played it before or never had the chance, Dishonored is one of those games that always feels fresh, no matter how many times you return to Dunwall.
By an officer of the watch.
Far Cry 3. Far Cry 3 is the game that redefined the open-world shooter and set the standard for the series. Released in 2012, it dropped players onto a lush, dangerous island and let them loose. Over a decade later, it's still as thrilling, chaotic, and impactful as ever. You play as Jason Brody, a privileged kid who gets thrust into survival mode when a vacation with friends turns into a nightmare. The story starts with you captured by pirates, and right away you meet Vas Montenegro, one of gaming's most iconic villains. His performance is chilling and magnetic, and even though he's not in the game as much as you might expect, every scene with him is unforgettable. The story explores themes of survival, madness, and power, and while it gets a little wild toward the end, it's a ride worth taking.
Don't like the way.
The island itself is the real star. It's massive, full of activities, and incredibly immersive. One moment you're stealthily taking down an enemy outpost, the next, you're running from a tiger or dodging a Komodo dragon. The wildlife adds an unpredictable edge to everything, keeping you constantly on your toes. The gameplay loop is near perfect. Liberating outposts feels satisfying every time, and the skill tree progression makes you feel like you're evolving from a scared outsider to an unstoppable jungle warrior. Whether you're crafting gear from hunted animals, ziplining into a firefight, or setting fire to an entire enemy camp, the game never stops being fun. Dragon Age Origins. Dragon Age Origins is one of those RPGs that feels like a warm, epic hug from the past. Released in 2009 by BioWare, this game brought back the glory days of deep story-driven RPGs. Even now, over a decade later, it's the kind of game you can lose yourself in for hours without even realizing it. This is a game where your choices really matter. You're thrust into the world of Ferelden during a time of chaos of blight threatens the land, and it's up to you as a newly minted Grey Warden to unite a fractured world to fight it. The character creation and origin stories are genius. Whether you're a Dalish elf, a noble human, or a casteless dwarf, your starting point shapes how the world reacts to you. It gives you a sense of ownership over your character that few games achieve. The story itself, classic fantasy done right. It's got betrayal, political intrigue, romance, and epic battles, but what really elevates it is the cast of characters. Alistair, Morgan, Liliana, Shale, their banter and personal quests make them feel like real companions. You're not just traveling with them, you're building relationships, making tough calls, and yes, occasionally getting yelled at for being a jerk.
You do us a great honor by suffering in silence.
I was not suffering, silently or otherwise, until now.
Combat is tactical and satisfying. You can pause the action, plan your moves, and manage your party's abilities. It's perfect for players who like a bit of strategy in their battles. And the game doesn't hold your hand, it's challenging, especially on higher difficulties, but that just makes every victory sweeter. The world building is rich. From the oppressive caste system of the dwarfs to the Chantry's religious influence, everything feels layered and alive. The lore runs deep, but it's presented in a way that never feels overwhelming. Now, so why is Dragon Age Origins still worth playing today? Because it's a masterclass in RPG design. The story, characters, and world are timeless, and the gameplay is just as satisfying as it was back in 2009. Whether you're new to the series or revisiting Ferelden for the 100th time, Origins is a reminder of why BioWare was at the top of its game and why this epic still stands tall. It's not just a game, it's a journey you'll never forget. Metro Last Light. Metro Last Light is one of those games that pulls you into its world so completely you forget the real one exists. Released in 2013, it's the sequel to Metro 2033, and while the first game laid the groundwork, Last Light took everything to a whole new level. Even now, over a decade later, it's a stunning example of immersive storytelling and atmosphere done right. You step back into the boots of Artyom, navigating the claustrophobic tunnels of the Moscow Metro and the harsh, radioactive surface above. The story picks up where 2033 left off, diving deeper into the political struggles between factions, the mystery of the Dark Ones, and Artyom's personal journey. It's intense, emotional, and filled with moments that'll stay with you long after you're done playing. What makes Last Light stand out is its atmosphere. The Metro feels alive in the most haunting way. Every station, every dark tunnel, every ruined surface area is dripping with detail. The flickering lights, eerie sounds, and constant sense of danger create an immersive experience that few games can match. Whether you're sneaking past mutants or exploring abandoned ruins, there's always this nagging feeling that something's watching you. The gameplay is a fantastic mix of stealth, survival, and action. Resources are scarce, and every bullet counts literally. Since ammo is also currency, you're always making tough choices. Do you conserve your ammo, or do you go all in to survive an ambush? The stealth mechanics are solid, and the game rewards you for taking the quieter, more strategic approach, but when things go loud, the combat is punchy and satisfying. Last Light also shines in its storytelling. It's not just in the main plot, it's in the little moments. NPCs having conversations, bits of lore scattered around, or a quiet interaction that reveals more about the world. It's the kind of game where you stop and listen because everything feels meaningful. Dead Space. Dead Space. This is the survival horror game that redefined the genre when it launched in 2008, and even after all these years, it's still an absolute masterclass in tension, atmosphere, and pure, unrelenting terror. If you've ever wanted to know what it feels like to be trapped in a nightmare, this game nails it. You play as Isaac Clarke, an engineer sent to investigate a distress signal from the USG Ishimura, a massive mining ship. What you find, let's just say it's not a friendly crew. The Ishimura is overrun with necromorphs, horrific reanimated corpses that don't just want to kill you, they want to rip you apart. The ship itself feels like a living entity with creaking metal, flickering lights, and unsettling silence that's constantly interrupted by something awful. What makes Dead Space legendary is its unique approach to combat. Shooting enemies in the head won't cut it, you've got to dismember them to take them down. It's strategic, brutal, and keeps you constantly on edge. And the weapons are ingenious. Isaac's tools, like the plasma cutter and line gun, aren't traditional firearms, they're mining equipment repurposed to survive a nightmare. It adds to the immersion and makes every shot feel desperate. The atmosphere is where Dead Space truly shines. Every corner of the Ishimura is dripping with tension. The sound design deserves an award all on its own. Whispers in the distance, the screech of metal, and the unsettling moans of the necromorphs make you question every step you take. Pair that with the minimal HUD, where everything you need, health, ammo, objectives, is displayed directly on Isaac's suit or weapons, and it's one of the most immersive gaming experiences ever. The story is deceptively simple but hides a deeper layer of horror. As you uncover what happened on the Ishimura, you're pulled into a narrative that's equal parts sci-fi thriller and psychological terror. And Isaac, he's not just an empty shell. His descent into madness as he uncovers the truth adds emotional weight to the chaos. Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus is one of those rare games that feels less like something you play and more like something you live. Originally released in 2005 for the PS2, this isn't just a game, it's a work of art that's managed to stay as breathtaking now as it was nearly 20 years ago. Here's the setup: you wander, armed with nothing but a sword, a bow, and a horse named Agro, riding into a forbidden land on a desperate mission. You're trying to bring someone you love back to life, but there's a cost: you've got to take down 16 massive colossi. That's it. No dungeons, no side quests, no endless menus, just 16 battles, each one feeling like its own chapter in an epic tale. The colossi are the game. They're not just enemies, they're living puzzles. Some are slow and towering, others are fast and ferocious and figuring out how to bring them down feels like solving a mystery written in stone and fur. Climbing up their massive bodies, holding on for dear life as they thrash around, is pure adrenaline, and when they finally fall, it's a mix of triumph and heartbreak. You don't feel like a hero, you feel like you've just stolen something sacred. The world you ride through is almost silent, but that's what makes it so powerful. It's vast, empty, and haunting, with ruins and landscapes that feel like echoes of a forgotten time. There's no one around, no bustling cities or NPCs shouting your name. It's just you, Agro, and the distant roar of the wind. That loneliness, it's part of what makes the game so unforgettable. And the music, my god, the music. When you're fighting a Colossus, the orchestral score doesn't just accompany you, it lifts you up. It's triumphant, tragic, and overwhelming, perfectly matching the scale of what's happening on screen. It's the kind of soundtrack that stays with you long after the game is over. What makes Shadow of the Colossus truly timeless is how much it leaves unsaid. The story is simple on the surface, but there's so much going on beneath. It doesn't tell you how to feel it lets you figure that out for yourself. And the result is an experience that feels personal, almost intimate. Even now, whether you're playing the PS2 original, the PS3 remaster, or the stunning PS4 remake, this game is an absolute must-play. It's not just a piece of gaming history, it's a reminder of what games can be: bold, beautiful, and deeply, profoundly human. Limbo. Limbo isn't just a game, it's an emotional journey through shadows and silence. Released in 2010 by Playdead, this minimalist puzzle platformer captured the gaming world's attention with its haunting atmosphere and simplicity. Over a decade later, it's still as impactful as the day it launched. The premise is stripped down to its core. You're a nameless boy wandering through a dark, eerie world in search of your sister. That's it. There's no dialogue, no exposition, and no tutorials. Everything you need to know is told through the environment and your actions. It's a game that trusts you to figure things out, and that's part of what makes it so memorable. Visually, Limbo is stunning in its simplicity. The black and white art style, combined with subtle lighting and shadows, creates a world that feels unsettling and beautiful all at once. The lack of color doesn't make it dull, it makes it haunting. Every frame looks like it could be pulled from an art exhibit. The puzzles are clever, challenging, and often brutal. This is a game that isn't afraid to kill you repeatedly, but every death feels like a lesson, pushing you to think differently, pay closer attention, or take a leap of faith. And some of those deaths, yeah, they're disturbing in ways that stick with you. It's not gory, but it doesn't need to be. The implied violence hits harder. The sound design is just as crucial as the visuals. There's no music, only the ambient noises of the world, the hum of machinery, the rustle of leaves, the faint, distant sounds of something you don't want to meet. It's minimalist, but it amplifies the tension, making every moment feel raw and immediate. What makes Limbo timeless is how it balances mystery and emotion. It doesn't spell anything out for you why the boy is here, what this world is, what's real or imagined. It leaves space for you to interpret, and that ambiguity makes it unforgettable. It's not just a game you play, it's a game you think about long after it's over. If you've never played Limbo, it's a short but profound experience that every gamer should try. And if you've already been through its dark, twisted world, maybe it's time to revisit it. It's proof that sometimes less is so much more. Max Payne 2. Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne, doesn't just tell a story, it drags you headfirst into a spiral of love, betrayal, and all the beautiful chaos in between. Released in 2003, it's a sequel that elevates everything the original built while doubling down on its noir roots. 2 decades later, it's still a game that feels like a perfectly written, brutally poetic fever dream. Let's start with Max himself. He's not just your average action hero, he's broken, haunted, and maybe a little too self-aware. His narration? Pure gold. It's this mix of despair and dark poetry that somehow makes every line unforgettable. Dreams have a nasty habit of going bad when you're not looking. That's not just a quote, it's a mood. Max isn't just fighting through enemies, he's fighting through himself, and that vulnerability makes him feel so real. Then there's Mona Sachs, the femme fatale who crashes back into Max's life like a gunshot through glass. Their relationship is messy, dangerous, and tragic in the best possible way. It's not just the action pulling you forward, it's the weight of their connection, their shared pain, and the inevitability of it all coming undone.
This is as safe as it gets.
And let's talk gameplay. Bullet time isn't just a gimmick here, it's an art form. Diving in slow motion, dodging bullets midair while dual-wielding pistols. It's pure action movie magic. But what really makes it shine is the physics. Thanks to the Havoc engine, every shootout feels dynamic, tables flip, debris scatters, and enemies fall in ways that feel unpredictably real. Every encounter feels personal, like you're orchestrating your own chaotic ballet of destruction. The world of Max Payne 2 is another level entirely. It's grimy, rain-soaked, and filled with moments that linger. An empty, dimly lit hospital feels just as intense as a full-on gunfight. The game doesn't just throw you into places, it makes you feel the weight of them. Every corner tells a story. Every broken window feels deliberate. What makes Max Payne 2 so timeless is how it marries style and substance. It's a game that revels in its over-the-top action while delivering a narrative that cuts deep. The pacing is tight, the writing is sharp, and the emotion, it hits harder than a shotgun blast. Tomb Raider 2013. Tomb Raider 2013 didn't just reboot a franchise, it reintroduced a legend, stripped of her icon status, and reimagined as a real, flawed, and deeply human character. This isn't the Lara Croft of the 90s confidently flipping through ancient tombs with her twin pistols. This Lara starts scared, vulnerable, and unsure of herself. And watching her evolve into a survivor, it's nothing short of transformative. The story kicks off with a shipwreck, a literal plunge into chaos. Lara and her crew are stranded on a remote island, and things go downhill fast. The island itself is more than a setting, it's an antagonist. From treacherous cliffs to shadowy caves, everything is out to kill you, and the game captures that danger perfectly. The semi-open world design invites exploration without overwhelming you, rewarding curiosity with secrets, upgrades, and a deeper understanding of the island's eerie past. Combat feels raw and desperate, just like Lara's situation. You start with little more than a bow, and let me tell you, that Bowie becomes your best friend. Every arrow you fire feels deliberate, every takedown satisfying. And as you progress, Lara gains confidence and skill, mirrored in her arsenal growing from makeshift tools to powerful weapons. The combat isn't about overpowering enemies, it's about outsmarting them, using the environment, and adapting to survive. The game's cinematic flair never overshadows its soul. Every set piece, from collapsing ruins to harrowing tapes, feels earned because of how grounded Lara's journey is. You're not just along for the ride, you're shaping her into the legend she's destined to be. Why does Tomb Raider 2013 still resonate today? Because it took an icon and made her real. It's not about the nostalgia of the old Lara, it's about watching a young woman find her strength, clawing her way through a brutal world and emerging on the other side. This isn't just a reboot, it's a rebirth. Whether you're playing for the first time or returning to see where it all began, this is a journey worth taking. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater isn't just a game, it's a masterpiece of espionage, storytelling, and sheer creativity. Released in 2004, it was a bold shift for the series, ditching the futuristic tech and sprawling conspiracies to drop you into the jungle during the height of the Cold War. Even today, nearly 2 decades later, it's still hailed as one of the greatest games of all time. Let's talk about the setting. The jungle isn't just a backdrop, it's a survival experience. You're Naked Snake, a younger version of Big Boss, sent on a mission to rescue a scientist and take down a former former mentor, the boss who's defected to the Soviet Union. The lush, hostile wilderness is your playground, and it's packed with wildlife enemies and secrets. You're not just sneaking past guards or hunting for food, managing injuries and camouflaging yourself to blend into the environment. It's immersive in a way that few games dared to be at the time. The gameplay redefines stealth. Camouflage, stamina, and even curing wounds add layers of depth. You need to hide in plain sight, match your camo to the terrain, running low on energy, hunt and eat wildlife, but watch out, some food can spoil. The mechanics make you feel like a real operative, adapting to survive in hostile territory. And the boss battles? Legendary. From the heart-pounding sniper duel with the end to the psychological mind games of the Sorrow, every encounter feels iconic and memorable.
By your own hand.
The story is peak Hideo Kojima. It's packed with twists, emotion, and that perfect blend of the absurd and the profound. The relationship between Snake and the boss is the beating heart of the game. By the time you reach the emotional gut punch of the finale, you're not just playing a mission, you're living through one of the most powerful moments in gaming history. The soundtrack? Unforgettable. The title track, Snake Eater, is a Bond-inspired banger that sets the tone perfectly. It's dramatic, over the top, and yet completely fitting for the game's larger-than-life vibe. What makes Metal Gear Solid 3 timeless is how everything works together: the mechanics, the story, the atmosphere. It's not just a game about sneaking around, it's about survival, loyalty, betrayal, and what it means to be a soldier. Whether you're a die-hard fan or new to the series, Snake Eater is a journey worth taking. It's a masterpiece that hasn't aged a day, and honestly, it probably never will. Yakuza 3. Now, I talk a lot about the Yakuza series a lot, usually mentioning Yakuza 0, Kiwami, or Like a Dragon, but Yakuza 3 is one of the most underrated ones. Yakuza 3 is a fascinating turning point for the series, blending gritty crime drama with heartfelt character moments. Released in 2009, it's where the franchise stepped out of the shadows of its cult status and started showing off the heart and soul that would define it. While it's a bit rough around the edges by today's standards, it's a game that still carries the unique charm and emotional weight that fans love. This time, Kiryu stepping away from the neon-soaked streets of Kamurocho to run a quiet orphanage in Okinawa. Yes, that Kiryu, the Dragon of Dojima, now spends his days solving playground disputes and making curry for kids. It sounds mundane, but it's what makes Yakuza 3 so special. It humanizes Kiryu, showing a softer side to the legendary Yakuza. Of course, trouble always finds him. The game throws him back into the fray with a story involving land disputes, political corruption, and rival clans. The contrast between Okinawa's sunny beaches and Kamurocho's gritty nightlife mirrors Kiryu's internal struggle. He just wants peace, but the Yakuza world won't let him go. Gameplay-wise, Yakuza 3 introduces some big changes. I think you can consider it the first HD game of the series, more activities to sink your time into, karaoke, golf, fishing, and even managing your orphanage. It's a wild mix of serious drama and ridiculous side content. The combat is fun, though not as refined as later entries. Still, it's satisfying to pummel enemies with whatever's lying around, from bicycles to traffic cones. Where Yakuza 3 truly shines is its storytelling. The themes of family, loyalty, and finding a place to belong hit hard. The moments with the kids at the orphanage feel heartfelt and genuine, and when the stakes get high, the emotional payoff is worth every minute. Yes, it shows its age, especially with slower pacing and some dated mechanics, but for fans of the series, Yakuza 3 is essential. It's the bridge between the raw intensity of the early games and the broader emotional depth the series would later embrace.